race from the depths of sin. And through this plan, God has purpose, and He will undo everything that sin has done. Did you hear that? Through this plan, God will undo and reverse everything that sin has done. Do you believe that? Do you believe that? I hope so, friends, because tonight you will discover this amazing plan. It's just absolutely beautiful to study. In the book of Genesis, chapter 3, verse 15. Remember, we saw yesterday how Adam and Eve fell in sin. How they gave their loyalty that they had to God. They surrendered to Satan, and Satan took control by deceiving them. And in that moment when God appears in the picture and Adam and Eve are running away trying to hide, and then God finds them and brings them to Him, God begins to speak with them. And in Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, God unveils the plan for the human race. Do you remember what God had said to Adam and Eve would happen to them if they ate of the fruit? What would happen? Do you remember the text? It says, "For the day you eat of it, you shall surely die." Let me ask you a question. Did Adam and Eve die the day they ate of the fruit? Did they die? No, they didn't. According to the Bible, Adam and Eve died 1,000 years later. 930 years later, Adam died. They used to live a long time in those days. And dear friends, according to the scriptures, Adam and Eve did not die. Let me ask you a question then. Did God lie to them? Did God lie to them? Why they didn't die? When God said, "The day you eat of it, you shall surely die," did He mean what He said? Well, friends, when we studied this prophecy here, you realize that God had something behind His sleeve that He had told no one in the universe about it. And in Genesis chapter 3 verse 15, after talking to the woman, Jesus turns to the serpent, and through the serpent He's talking to Satan, and He says, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and his seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." You know, this is the first promise, the first prophecy, and it is the first time that God unveils His plan of salvation to the human race. Until that moment, the universe did not know what God would do. When the news arrived in heaven that Adam and Eve had fallen in sin, the angels began to cry because they knew that the penalty for sin was death. And then God comes into the world, and instead of punishing Adam and Eve, He begins to talk with them in love. He begins to search with them. God could have done this, friends, just that, and the world would have been gone. And then He could have just done that and taken off the mind of all the angels and of all the other created worlds the memory that there was one day an earth. He could have saved Himself thousands of years of heartache and pain if He could have just flicked His finger. But the love of God for the human race is so deep, so strong, that He committed Himself to the salvation of the race at whatever cost to Him. At whatever cost to Him. And here we see the first views, the first bit of light peeking through the darkness. If you were Adam and Eve, how would you be feeling that moment? You heard the words of God saying, "If you eat, you'll die." How do you think Adam and Eve are feeling when they hear the voice of God coming? What are they expecting? They're expecting God to come with a long stick, and He is going to kill them. Instead, God comes into the picture and says, "Adam, Eve, where are you?" They come all ashamed, all afraid, and He begins to question what has happened, what happened. And then He turns to the serpent and says these amazing words. These words surprised Satan. These words surprised the universe, the angels who didn't know what was going on. You see, Satan thought that now he had God by the neck. He thought that now, by conquering the human race, Satan had put God against the wall, and that God would have to ask him forgiveness for throwing him out of heaven. But instead, God turns around and says to Satan, Satan, I'm going to put enmity between the woman and you, and between her seed and your seed. He shall crush your head, while you will only bite his heel. What does this mean? Let us decode it. In the scriptures, the symbol of a woman represents God's people. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 6, verse 2, we find the following text. It says, I have likened the daughter of Zion to a lovely and delicate woman. Notice here how the daughter of Zion, which is a symbol of Israel, the people of God in the Old Testament, are compared to a lovely and delicate woman. And dear friends, that morning when God is speaking to Adam and Eve and to the serpent and says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, friends, is a symbol of God's people. But in that moment, friends, Satan had just taken control of planet Earth. He had just grabbed the heart of the humans. He had turned the nature of humanity against God. Now it was natural for humans to hate God and to run away from Him, to be ashamed and guilty of what God was. Yet God comes and says, there's going to be a woman. And this woman, in this woman, I'm going to put enmity against you. What is God saying to this? Satan, you think you've taken planet Earth? In this moment, I'm challenging you to war. In this very moment, I declare war against you, Satan, and the war is going to be fought in the minds of human beings, because I'm going to plant an enmity on those who take my side. You think that the human race belongs to you? Let me tell you, Satan, it doesn't. There are going to be people from this very moment, from the moment of Adam and Eve, right through to the very end of human history, people that are going to love me, people that are going to take my side, people that are going to take my plan, and they are going to be rescued, and they will hate you. These first few words begin to realize in the minds of Satan that though he has had an apparent victory, his victory is not going to be for very long. That word, enmity, if you come to the book of Romans chapter 8, verse 7, gives us a description of what enmity means. If you read here, it says, because the carnal mind is enmity against God. What is enmity? Enmity is a dislike, a distaste, an antagonism. And the natural mind, your mind as you are born, is in enmity against God, as we learned yesterday. But dear friends, God is saying to Satan, there's going to be a people on planet Earth that will no longer have enmity against me, they will have enmity against you. And in order for an enmity, for this kind of enmity to take place, God is saying, I'm going to give them a brand new mind. I'm going to change their natures. I'm going to transform their souls. I'm going to give them a new heart. And instead of hating me, they're going to hate you. In other words, God is promising that He is going to intervene in the human picture to save the human race. And then, friends, that verse of Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15 says, for I will put enmity between you and the woman, the serpent. Who is the serpent? Well, the serpent we know in Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, that is a symbol of Satan. The arch deceiver, the great enemy of God, is the serpent who deceived this world and took control. Therefore, war is going to take place. Friends, because of sin, because of what Adam and Eve did, this planet became a war zone. This planet became a place where the two greatest powers in the universe would fight for the destiny of every single soul that has lived, is living, and will live on planet Earth. Dear friends, behind your birth, behind your life, every moment of your life, there is a death confrontation between the powers of death and evil, and of good and evil, for your destiny. Have you ever thought of that, how important you are? How valuable you are to God? God could have done that, friends.